My name is Elena Ward. I'm 39 years old, the sister who vanished from family photographs, the one they whispered about at dinners I wasn't invited to. I gave up more than they'll ever know, safety, comfort, my own name, to protect P. The last time I saw my brother, he called me a traitor. The next time I heard his voice, it was through a half-open door, plotting something that could destroy me. My heels struck the TI. Before I tell you the rest, the betrayals, the choices, and the moment I finally stepped into the light, I want you to do one thing for me: drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe. You'll want to hear how it ends. And it all. The sound of my heels striking the courthouse's polished tile echoed in steady, measured beats, the kind of rhythm that makes people look up without knowing why. It was supposed to be just another morning, another routine step in a long road I had walked alone. But even as the sunlight spilled through the glass doors ahead, something in the air felt loaded. At the reception desk, conversations dipped into silence. Eyes shifted toward me, then away again, like they were afraid I might ask the wrong question. A thick, brown envelope lay on the counter, my name written in blocky letters I hadn't seen in decades. I reached for it, feeling the texture of the paper, rough, like it had been handled too many times. Inside was a single black and white photograph. It took me half a breath to recognize the young woman in it, barely 19, standing in front of my old family home, wearing the same stubborn smile I used to practice in the mirror. But behind her, blurred and shadowed, was a figure I thought had been gone from my life forever. The photo trembled slightly in my hand. The footsteps motif was back, my own this time, as I turned and walked toward the hallway, the sound sharper now, faster. The picture had pulled me backward in time, into a part of my life I had buried so deep I sometimes wondered if I had imagined it. I wasn't imagining it. And whatever this was, it wasn't here by accident. And that was the moment I knew, this couldn't possibly be just a coincidence. The courthouse hallway was long and narrow, lined with frosted glass doors that caught the morning light. My footsteps rang out against the tile, each one landing in the hush like a gavel strike. I'd walked this corridor hundreds of times, but today the sound felt louder, heavier. Halfway down, I caught it, the faint murmur of voices behind a door left open just enough for sound to slip through. I slowed, letting my heel fall softer on the floor, the echo stretching out until it was barely there. She doesn't know. The first voice was low, urgent. Then keep it that way, another replied, sharper. My name surfaced in the conversation, quiet but unmistakable, like hearing your own reflection speak. I leaned a fraction closer, careful not to let the light from the hall spill across the gap. Once it's over, she won't matter. Not after what's coming. A chair scraped. Papers shuffled. I straightened instinctively, steps resuming at a normal pace, the sound of my shoes filling the space between us. I didn't want them to know I had been listening, not yet. One of the doors opened suddenly. A man I recognized, but couldn't place, stepped out, giving me a glance too quick to be casual. He nodded, muttered something under his breath, and disappeared in the opposite direction. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't just heard the beginning of something dangerous. But the words were lodged in my head, unshakable. They thought I hadn't heard them. But every syllable was now a stone in the road I was about to walk, and I had no intention of stepping around it. The records room sat at the far end of the basement corridor, its heavy steel door groaning as I pushed it open. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a cold glow on the endless rows of metal shelves. My footsteps echoed differently here. Sharper, bouncing off the concrete walls like they were keeping time with my pulse. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, at least, that's what I told myself. But my hands moved with a kind of muscle memory, pulling open drawers, sliding out folders, flipping through pages stained with years of ink and dust. And then I saw it. A thin, cream-colored file, misfiled between two unrelated cases. My name wasn't on the label, but the signature on the first page froze me mid-breath. It belonged to someone I trusted, someone who had been there when the floor first dropped out from under my life. Back then, they'd been the only person to tell me I'd survive it. Now, their name was here, on a contract tied to the very people who had once wanted me gone. I traced the ink with my fingertip, my mind refusing to connect the lines even as they formed a perfect circle around me. A noise at the far end of the room made me look up, the soft tap of shoes on tile, too slow to be casual, too deliberate to be chance. I closed the file and slid it under my arm, my own heels answering the sound with a quicker, sharper rhythm. When I reached the doorway, the corridor beyond was empty. But the echo lingered, mine and theirs, woven together, fading into silence. I told myself it could have been anyone. But deep down, I already knew, this wasn't just a mistake in the filing system. This was a warning. Night fell early that day, the winter sky bruised and heavy as I walked toward the meeting room. The overhead lights flickered once, humming in the quiet like a nervous breath. My footsteps on the courthouse tile were steady, but the sound carried farther than it should have, each strike landing like a countdown. Inside, the room was nearly empty, just a single table, a stack of files, and the faint scent of stale coffee. I set my bag down, pulled the photograph from my pocket, and placed it next to the file I'd found in the records room. It wasn't long before the door opened. They walked in like they owned the air, the person I'd once leaned on, trusted with my most vulnerable truths. Their eyes skimmed the table, pausing on the photo, then the file. "You've been looking where you shouldn't," they said, their voice too calm, like this was a conversation about weather and not betrayal. "And you've been standing where you shouldn't," I replied, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. They didn't deny it. Instead, they stepped closer, their shoes clicking against the tile in a rhythm that matched my own. It was a sound I'd been hearing in the shadows for days, the same deliberate steps in the records room, the same patient pacing outside that half-open door. The file lay open now, pages spread like a confession. Financial transfers. Handwritten notes. Meeting dates that lined up perfectly with the times I'd been misled, rerouted, stalled. And there, in black ink, the signature that connected them to everything I'd been chasing for years. The truth landed like a blow I'd been bracing for but still couldn't soften. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had helped build the very cage I'd been fighting to escape. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. My heartbeat filled the silence, syncing with the echo of our shoes. Finally, I closed the file, slid it back into my bag, and stepped past them toward the door. My footsteps this time were louder, on purpose. They had followed me in shadows long enough. Now it was my turn. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was a hive of muted chaos, lawyers in dark suits rushing past, clerks balancing armfuls of files, reporters lingering near the main entrance like vultures circling fresh prey. I stepped inside, my heels clicking sharply against the tile. The sound cut through the noise, deliberate and measured, each step a reminder that I had come here to finish something. The night before, I'd gone through the evidence one last time. Every page, every photograph, every recorded conversation had been checked, numbered, and sealed. There would be no mistakes. Not today. As I made my way toward the courtroom, I passed the person who had betrayed me. Their eyes flickered when they saw the envelope in my hand, a flash of recognition, then calculation. They said nothing, but their shoes shifted against the floor, a restless scrape that betrayed the calm mask they wore. Inside, the air was cooler, heavier. I placed the envelope on the prosecution's table, feeling the weight of it leave my hand. That weight didn't disappear, though. It settled somewhere deeper, like the quiet before a storm. The judge wasn't in yet. People were still moving around, papers rustling, voices murmuring in low tones. And yet, over it all, I could hear the echo of my own footsteps in my head, as if they were still carrying me forward even though I'd stopped moving. I glanced across the aisle. The betrayer wouldn't meet my gaze now. Their focus was on the table in front of them, but their fingers twitched against the wood, tapping out a rhythm they couldn't control. The bailiff called for order. Everyone took their places. I exhaled slowly, feeling the last threads of hesitation burn away. They had no idea that by the time my evidence was read into the record, the game would already be over. And I only needed one moment, and I had it. When it was over, the courtroom felt strangely hollow. The murmur of voices had faded, replaced by the quiet shuffle of people gathering their things. Papers slid into folders. Chairs scraped against the floor. But in my mind, all I could hear was the echo of my own steps as I rose from my seat. The verdict had been clear. The guilty would serve their sentences, their influence stripped away, their careful lies shattered under the weight of truth. It wasn't just a legal win, it was the closing of a door I'd been trying to shut for years. I walked down the aisle, each heel strike a slow, steady beat against the tile. This time, the sound wasn't heavy with tension or anticipation. It was lighter. Not because the past had disappeared, but because I was no longer carrying it. At the exit, I paused. Through the glass doors, the afternoon sun spilled across the courthouse steps, warming the chill in my skin. Behind me, I could feel their eyes, the ones who had once followed me in shadows, who thought they knew the measure of my strength. I didn't look back. Some endings don't need witnesses. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. My footsteps softened against the stone steps, fading into the hum of the city. And as I reached the street, I realized the most important thing. I hadn't won because they lost. I'd won because I refused to become like them. In the end, it wasn't the guilty verdicts or the cold metal of justice served that stayed with me. It was the sound of my own footsteps leaving that courthouse, steady, unhurried, no longer chased by shadows. For years, I'd thought winning meant seeing them fall, watching the ones who hurt me stripped of power and pride. But walking into the sunlight that afternoon, I realized the real victory was quieter. It was in the choice I made, over and over, not to let what they did define who I became. People will tell you that time heals all wounds. It doesn't. Some wounds stay with you, but you get to decide whether they stay open, or whether they turn into scars you can live with. I won't pretend I'm the same person I was before it all began. I'm not. I'm someone who has walked through lies, betrayal, and loss, and still found a way to keep walking. Someone who learned that strength isn't about how loud you can shout when you win, it's about how quietly you can hold your ground when no one's watching. If there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this: you don't have to match cruelty with cruelty. You don't have to become the thing that tried to break you. There is power in refusing to mirror the darkness you've seen. So, when the day comes that you take your last step away from whatever's been holding you down, listen to the sound it makes. Make sure it's a step toward the person you've always wanted to be. And then, keep walking.